It was 11:47 p.m. when I caught the VP's daughter stealing company resources worth $282,000 per month. She was hunched over a server terminal in our data center, fingers flying across a keyboard like she owned the place. Problem was, what she was doing had nothing to do with her job title and everything to do with cryptocurrency mining using our corporate infrastructure. My name's Patrick Sullivan, I'm 49, and I've been managing operations at Globeworks Corporation for 22 years. Started here right after I got out of the Navy, worked my way up from logistics coordinator to senior operations manager. I've seen every kind of corporate nonsense you can imagine, but this was something entirely new. I was doing my usual late-night walkthrough, checking security protocols and reviewing system alerts when I noticed lights on in the server room. Our last scheduled maintenance was 3 days ago, and nobody should have been in there at midnight on a Tuesday. The door was propped open with a rubber doorstop, which immediately set off alarm bells. Our IT security protocols require that door to be locked at all times. Inside, Madison Walsh was completely absorbed in whatever she was running on our main processing cluster. She had multiple terminal windows open, displaying streams of data that looked like computational algorithms. When she heard my footsteps, she spun around with the guilty expression of someone who'd been caught doing exactly what they shouldn't be doing. "Oh, Patrick, you scared me," she said, trying to force that confident MBA smile she wore like armor. Madison's 26 years old, fresh out of some expensive private school with a degree that cost more than my annual salary. She's also the daughter of our VP of Strategic Development, which is how she landed the newly created position of Digital Innovation Director about 3 months ago, a title that didn't exist until Daddy decided his little girl needed a corporate sandbox to play in. "Working late?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral while scanning the monitors over her shoulder. "Just running some diagnostics on the new efficiency protocols," she said, but her hands were shaking slightly as she minimized the windows, making sure everything's optimized for maximum computational throughput. Madison had this way of talking that made my teeth hurt. Everything was buzzwords and corporate speak, synergy and digital transformation and leveraging cloud-native solutions for optimal bandwidth utilization. Half the time I don't think she knew what the words meant, but they sounded impressive in meetings. I nodded and pretended to check something on my phone. Well, don't stay too late. Building security gets nervous about after-hours access. She laughed, but it came out strained. Of course. Almost done here anyway. I left her there and went back to my desk, but something was eating at me. 22 years of operations management teaches you to trust your gut, and my gut was saying Madison Walsh was up to something that had nothing to do with digital innovation. The next morning, I started paying attention to details that most people ignore. Energy consumption reports, network traffic patterns, server utilization logs. The kind of boring administrative data that makes people's eyes glaze over, but tells you everything about what's really happening in a building. The first red flag was our electricity bill. Globeworks runs a tight ship on energy efficiency. LED lighting throughout the building, optimized HVAC systems, Energy Star-rated equipment. Our monthly power consumption had been consistent for 2 years, but suddenly we were showing a 31% increase in electrical usage over the past 3 months. For a building this size, that kind of spike meant something was drawing serious power, something new, something big, something that hadn't been there before Madison started her digital optimization project. Then I pulled the network traffic reports. Our bandwidth usage during off hours had more than doubled. Between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., when the building should be practically empty except for security, our servers were working harder than they did during peak business hours, processing massive amounts of data, running computational tasks that nobody had authorized. I cross-referenced the unusual activity with our project schedules and change orders. Nothing matched. No new software implementations, no data migrations, no legitimate business processes that would explain the extra load on our systems. But there was a pattern that stood out like a searchlight in the dark. The heavy computational activity started every night around 10:30 p.m. and ran until 5:30 a.m., 7 hours of intensive processing, 7 days a week for the past 12 weeks. That's when I realized Madison wasn't running efficiency protocols. She was running something else entirely, something that was using our servers as a cryptocurrency mining operation while the rest of the company slept. The beauty of her setup was its simplicity and audacity. She'd convinced management that increased power consumption and network usage were natural results of her digital transformation initiatives. Anyone who questioned the costs got shut down with MBA speak about investment in future-ready infrastructure and computational resource optimization for competitive advantage. But I knew better. This wasn't optimization. This was theft on an industrial scale. Company electricity, company processing power, company network bandwidth, all being used to generate cryptocurrency that was going straight into accounts that had nothing to do with Globeworks Corporation. I spent the next week digging deeper into the technical details, and what I found made my blood run cold. Madison had installed sophisticated mining software across our entire server farm. She was using our computational resources to solve blockchain algorithms, generating Bitcoin and Ethereum, while our company paid the electricity bills and cloud computing costs. The operation was more sophisticated than I'd initially realized. She wasn't just running simple mining programs. She'd created a distributed network that used our local servers for initial processing, then routed the heavy computational work through our AWS cloud accounts to maximize processing power. This explained why our monthly cloud computing bill had jumped from $45,000 to $327,000 over the past 3 months, $282,000 in extra monthly costs, all going toward generating cryptocurrency for Madison Walsh's personal accounts. By my calculations, Madison had stolen approximately $846,000 worth of computational resources over 3 months, not estimated, calculated down to the kilowatt hour and processing cycle. But knowing something and proving it in a way that would hold up under scrutiny were two different things entirely. At 49, you don't just march into the CEO's office and start throwing accusations around, especially when those accusations target the VP's daughter. You need evidence. Bulletproof, documented, stand-up in federal court evidence that even family connections can't deflect or explain away. So I started building my case like a Navy logistics operation, methodical, systematic, and absolutely airtight. First, I needed to understand exactly what she was doing technically. I spent 4 nights running network trace routes on the suspicious traffic, following data streams to their ultimate destinations. What I discovered was a sophisticated operation that used our local servers for initial blockchain computations, then routed the heavy processing work through our AWS cloud accounts to maximize mining efficiency. The cryptocurrency mining wasn't happening entirely on our physical hardware. Madison was using our servers as coordination nodes for a distributed mining network that leveraged our cloud computing accounts to rent additional processing power from Amazon's data centers. This hybrid approach explained both the spike in our electricity bills and the massive increase in cloud computing costs. Second, I needed financial documentation that would satisfy any auditor. The beauty of blockchain technology is that every transaction gets recorded permanently in a public ledger. Madison might have thought she was being clever with proxy servers and offshore routing, but she hadn't counted on someone who understood resource allocation tracking across complex distributed systems. I pulled our detailed AWS bills and cross-referenced them with blockchain transaction timestamps from the Bitcoin and Ethereum networks. The correlation was perfect, almost mathematical in its precision. Every spike in our cloud computing usage corresponded exactly with increased mining activity during the same time periods. Third, I needed proof of unauthorized system access and software installation. This was trickier because Madison had legitimate credentials for the server room and basic system access, but what she didn't have was authorization to install new software, modify existing processes, or create the kind of distributed mining network I'd discovered. I found 23 separate instances where she'd installed mining software without change orders, without IT approval, and without any documentation in our system modification logs. She'd also created hidden partition spaces on our backup servers, storage that wasn't being used for any legitimate business purpose but was dedicated entirely to cryptocurrency mining operations. The smoking gun came when I discovered she'd modified our cloud computing auto-scaling settings. Normally, our AWS instances scale up during business hours when we need extra processing power for legitimate work, then scale back down at night to save money. But Madison had reprogrammed the system to do the opposite. Minimal cloud usage during the day, maximum usage at night when her mining operations were running. She'd essentially turned our entire IT infrastructure into a cryptocurrency generation machine that operated while the company slept. But I couldn't do this alone. I needed technical backup from someone with cybersecurity credentials who could document the security violations and system compromises. That someone was Bill Harrison, our IT director. Bill's 52 years old, former cybersecurity consultant before he came to Globeworks 8 years ago. He takes network security seriously and has zero tolerance for unauthorized system modifications. When I showed him what I'd discovered, his reaction was immediate and professional. "This is federal computer fraud," he said, reviewing the evidence spread across my desk. "She's using company computational resources for personal financial gain without authorization. Wire fraud, theft of services, possibly money laundering depending on how she's converting the cryptocurrency to cash. Can you document the security violations from the IT perspective?" I asked. "Already working on it," Bill said, pulling out his laptop. "I've been tracking anomalous network behavior for 6 weeks but couldn't pinpoint the source. This explains everything: the unusual traffic patterns, the unauthorized software installations, the suspicious cloud scaling behavior." Bill spent the next 2 days generating comprehensive technical documentation, server access logs showing Madison's after-hours activity, process monitoring reports revealing unauthorized mining software running on company hardware, network traffic analysis proving the connection between our infrastructure and external cryptocurrency mining pools. "How long before someone else notices this?" I asked during one of our evening review sessions. "Not long. The quarterly security audit is scheduled for next week. If external auditors discover this operation before we report it internally, the entire company could face regulatory compliance issues. We're talking potential SEC violations, FTC penalties, maybe even criminal liability for the corporation itself." That's when I realized this wasn't just about stopping Madison Walsh. This was about protecting Globeworks Corporation, protecting my job, protecting my pension, and protecting the livelihoods of 2,400 other employees who had nothing to do with the VP's daughter's cryptocurrency scheme. The scope of potential legal exposure was staggering. If federal regulators determined that Globeworks had been operating an unauthorized cryptocurrency mining operation, even unknowingly, the company could face millions in fines, loss of business licenses, and criminal charges against corporate officers. We agreed to spend 1 more week gathering ironclad documentation, then take everything directly to CEO David Blackstone. Not to Madison's father. That would be career suicide and probably obstruction of justice. Straight to the top, with evidence that would leave no room for family politics, corporate favoritism, or plausible deniability. During that final week of evidence gathering, Madison's behavior became increasingly erratic. She started staying later in the office, sometimes until 2 a.m. She'd grown paranoid about server room access, installing her own keycard reader that bypassed our normal security protocols. She'd even brought in her own laptop and external storage devices, which violated about 12 different corporate information security policies. The Monday before our meeting with Blackstone, I found her in the server room again. But this time she wasn't installing mining software or optimizing computational processes. She was deleting files, wiping system logs, and removing evidence of her unauthorized activities. Too bad for her that I'd already copied everything to secure backup drives that she didn't know existed. Wednesday morning at 8:30 a.m., I walked into CEO David Blackstone's office carrying a briefcase full of evidence and 22 years of credibility backing every word I was about to say. Bill Harrison was with me, loaded down with technical documentation that would make any IT security professional break out in a cold sweat. Blackstone's been running Globeworks for 17 years, built the company from a 50-person startup into a $2.8 billion operation through careful management, strategic growth, and absolutely zero tolerance for anything that threatened the bottom line or regulatory compliance. He's not the kind of CEO who tolerates corporate politics, and he definitely doesn't have patience for theft. "This better be critical," he said without looking up from his monitor. "I've got a board presentation in 30 minutes. "It is," I said, setting my briefcase on his conference table. "We've uncovered an unauthorized cryptocurrency mining operation running on company infrastructure for the past 3 months. Total theft of computational resources and services, $846,000. That got his complete attention. He looked up with the sharp focus that comes when someone mentions numbers that could seriously damage the company's financial position and legal standing. Bill spread out the technical documentation while I laid out the financial evidence. Server access logs, blockchain transaction records, electricity consumption reports, AWS billing analysis, network traffic data. Everything documented, everything time-stamped, everything pointing to the same unmistakable conclusion. "Who's responsible?" Blackstone asked after scanning the first page of evidence. "Madison Walsh," I said, "Digital Innovation Director." His expression didn't change, but I caught something in his eyes. Not surprise, recognition. Like he'd been expecting this conversation, just not sure when it would happen. "Show me everything," he said, immediately canceling his board presentation. For the next 55 minutes, Bill and I walked him through the entire operation step by step. How Madison had used her legitimate system access to install unauthorized cryptocurrency mining software across our server farm. How she'd created a hybrid mining network that used our local computational power for initial blockchain processing, then routed the heavy computational work through our AWS cloud accounts to maximize mining efficiency. "The technical sophistication suggests this wasn't improvised," Bill explained. "This was planned, systematic exploitation of company resources for personal financial gain. She modified our cloud auto-scaling settings to maximize mining activity during off hours, created hidden storage partitions on backup servers, and installed 23 separate pieces of unauthorized software without any change control documentation." Blackstone studied the blockchain evidence with the concentrated focus of someone who understood exactly what financial and legal exposure this represented. "Federal computer fraud charges?" "Absolutely," Bill confirmed. "Wire fraud, theft of services, unauthorized access to protected computer systems, possibly money laundering depending on how she's converting the cryptocurrency to cash. The FBI's Computer Crimes Division would love this case." "And you're certain about the documentation chain of custody?" I leaned forward. "David, I've been tracking resource allocation and operational efficiency for 22 years. These numbers don't lie, and this evidence would satisfy any federal prosecutor. She's stolen $846,000 worth of computational services, electricity, and network bandwidth. The documentation is bulletproof." Blackstone closed the evidence folder and looked directly at me. "Immediate recommendations? Suspend her access to all systems immediately. Preserve all digital evidence before she can delete more files. Contact legal counsel and federal authorities, and change every security credential she's ever had access to before she realizes we're onto her operation. Consider it done." He picked up his phone. "Security, this is Blackstone. I need Madison Walsh's access credentials revoked immediately across all systems and physical locations, and I need her escorted to conference room C within 10 minutes. He hung up and turned back to us. "How much exposure does the company have if this goes public?" Bill answered first. "If federal regulators determine we were operating an unauthorized cryptocurrency mining operation, even unknowingly, we could face SEC violations for misleading financial reporting, FTC penalties for energy consumption misrepresentation, and potential criminal liability if they decide corporate officers should have known about the resource theft. Millions in fines," I added. "Possible loss of business licenses, criminal charges against executives, the works." Blackstone nodded grimly. "Then we handle this exactly right. Full cooperation with authorities, complete transparency, demonstrate that we discovered and reported the violation ourselves." 25 minutes later, Madison Walsh walked into conference room C expecting another routine meeting about digital transformation initiatives. Instead, she found Blackstone, our legal counsel Sarah Martinez, Bill Harrison, and me, waiting with briefcases full of evidence that would destroy her career and possibly land her in federal prison. "Madison," Blackstone said, without any preliminary small talk, "we've discovered unauthorized cryptocurrency mining operations running on company servers and cloud computing accounts, operations that we've traced directly to your system access credentials and your documented after-hours activities." I watched her face change in real time. The confident MBA smile disappeared, replaced by something that looked like panic trying to hide behind professional composure. Her hands started shaking slightly. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said, but her voice had lost that polished corporate edge. "All my activities have been focused on digital optimization and computational efficiency improvements for the company." Bill opened his laptop and turned the screen toward her. "These are blockchain transaction records showing cryptocurrency mining activity originating from our IP addresses and cloud computing accounts, activity that corresponds exactly with your documented server room access times over the past 12 weeks. The color drained from her face like someone had opened a valve. That's not possible. There must be some kind of mistake in the system logs. Sarah Martinez, our legal counsel, opened her folder. Madison, the evidence shows unauthorized installation of mining software, modification of cloud computing auto-scaling settings, creation of hidden storage partitions, and systematic theft of computational resources totaling $846,000 over 3 months. I placed the financial documentation on the table in front of her. The mistake was thinking someone with 22 years of operations experience wouldn't notice $282,000 in monthly resource theft, or that blockchain transactions don't leave permanent records. That's when she broke. The privileged princess facade cracked wide open, revealing a 26-year-old who'd never faced real consequences for anything in her entire life. "This is insane," Madison said, her voice cracking as she stared at the blockchain evidence. "I was improving computational efficiency for the company. Everything I implemented was designed to optimize our digital infrastructure utilization." Sarah Martinez, our legal counsel, leaned forward with the calm authority of someone who'd handled corporate fraud cases before. "Madison, cryptocurrency mining for personal financial gain using company resources isn't optimization. It's theft. You're suspended immediately pending federal investigation." "Federal?" Madison's face went white. "This is just a misunderstanding about resource allocation. You can't prove I personally benefited from any computational activities." I slid the cryptocurrency wallet addresses across the table toward her. "These blockchain accounts receiving the mining proceeds aren't registered to Globeworks Corporation. They're linked to offshore exchanges where someone's been converting Bitcoin and Ethereum to cash. Care to explain who owns those accounts?" She stared at the documentation like it was written in a foreign language. The confident corporate executive facade had completely collapsed, leaving behind someone who looked young, scared, and completely out of her depth. "I need to call my father," she said, reaching for her phone. "Your father doesn't have authority over federal computer fraud investigations," Blackstone said coldly. "You're welcome to contact him after you speak with your attorney, which I strongly recommend you do immediately." The next 6 hours moved with the mechanical precision of a federal investigation. FBI agents arrived at 2:15 p.m. with search warrants and digital forensics equipment. They seized Madison's work computer, her personal laptop, and every piece of hardware she'd accessed over the past 3 months. Special Agent Jennifer Torres, who led the computer crimes investigation, spent 45 minutes reviewing our evidence before telling Blackstone that this was one of the most thoroughly documented cases of corporate resource theft she'd seen in 12 years with the Bureau. "Your operations manager and IT director did outstanding work building this case," she said. "The documentation chain is perfect, the financial calculations are precise, and the technical evidence is bulletproof. We'll have federal charges filed within 48 hours." By 4:30 p.m., Madison Walsh was in federal custody, charged with wire fraud, computer fraud, theft of services, and money laundering. The investigation revealed that she'd actually stolen $863,000 worth of computational resources over 3 months and 2 weeks, slightly more than our initial calculations because she'd been running the operation for an additional 2 weeks before we noticed the patterns. The federal prosecutor called it systematic exploitation of corporate infrastructure for cryptocurrency generation and said Madison was looking at 7 to 12 years in federal prison, plus full restitution to Globeworks Corporation. The story hit the business news within 24 hours. VP's daughter, charged in $863K cryptocurrency theft scheme. Globeworks employee accused of mining Bitcoin on company servers. Federal charges filed in corporate crypto mining case. Madison's father, VP of Strategic Development Richard Walsh, submitted his resignation the same day his daughter was arrested. He claimed no knowledge of her activities, but the optics were impossible. The board accepted his resignation immediately. As for me, Blackstone called me into his office the Friday after Madison's arrest, exactly 1 week after we'd presented our evidence. "Patrick," he said, "I'm promoting you to Vice President of Operations, effective immediately. $52,000 salary increase, enhanced retirement package with full pension vesting, and a $85,000 performance bonus for preventing what could have been a catastrophic compliance disaster." I shook his hand and managed not to smile too wide. "Thank you, sir. Just doing my job." "No," he said. "You saved this company from potential federal prosecution and millions in regulatory fines. You did everyone's job better than they could have done it themselves. The bonus alone was enough to secure my 16-year-old daughter's college tuition and my 18-year-old son's remaining 2 years at state. The salary increase meant I could actually afford to retire at 62 instead of working until 67. The enhanced pension package meant I'd never have to worry about money again. That evening, I drove home to my apartment and called both kids to tell them that college costs were no longer something they needed to stress about. Then I opened a beer, sat on my couch, and thought about how a 49-year-old operations manager had just taken down a cryptocurrency thief using nothing but patience, documentation, and 22 years of professional experience. 6 months later, Madison Walsh pled guilty to all federal charges in exchange for a reduced sentence of 5 years in federal prison plus $863,000 in restitution payments. Her trust fund was frozen to cover the restitution, and she was permanently banned from working in any position involving corporate financial systems. The case became a cautionary tale in business schools about the importance of internal controls and the legal risks of cryptocurrency operations. Globeworks implemented new monitoring systems that would detect any future unauthorized computational activities within hours instead of months. I kept Bill Harrison as my direct report when I became VP. He deserved recognition for his technical expertise and investigative skills. We work well together, two professionals who understand that protecting corporate assets requires constant vigilance and attention to details that other people ignore. Sometimes late at night when I'm doing my security walkthroughs, I pass by the server room where I first caught Madison running her illegal operation. The door stays locked now, protected by enhanced security protocols and monitored 24/7 by automated systems. Madison Walsh learned the hard way that some people can't be bought, intimidated, or outmaneuvered through family connections. Sometimes the quiet guy who's been doing his job for 22 years is the most dangerous person in the building when you threaten his company, his colleagues, and his retirement security. And sometimes justice is just a matter of knowing how to read server logs, understanding financial patterns, and having the patience to build an airtight case that even federal prosecutors call bulletproof. The cryptocurrency mining equipment Madison installed was sold at auction, with proceeds going back to Globeworks to offset the theft losses. Her corporate access badges were destroyed, her employee records marked with federal fraud convictions, and her name added to industry databases that ensure she'll never work in corporate technology again. Justice served, career secured, and retirement funded. Sometimes the system actually works the way it's supposed to.